This coming Sunday is the year marked out in our pattern to focus on the Holy Trinity, which is this ancient and complicated doctrine that says that God is three persons in one being. The classic ancient language is to say God is the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and yet these are not three different gods, but one God in three persons. And Christian theologians have spent hours and probably weeks and years hashing it out, arguing with each other, getting the words just right for what they were convinced was the right way to describe how God is three in one. And to be very honest, here in the 21st century, for a lot of people, it's that notion of Trinity that they have the hardest time wrapping their brains around. It's the biggest obstacle, some people say, for them really understanding or embracing the Christian faith. Plenty of people will say, well, I can look at the world and say maybe something or someone made it. I can imagine a creator, whether it's personal or maybe more like a force, but I could imagine there's a creator. It's a harder sell to say, okay, the someone who made the universe is actually one, but also actually three at the same time. For a lot of people, that's the point at which they go, this is my stop, I'm getting off. I have a hard time imagining why it's so important to say that God is three and God is one. And some would just say, you know what, let's jettison that idea. Let's just say we believe in God and also Jesus is nice, end of story. But for all the complicated history of how Christianity got to a place of insisting God is three in one, increasingly I find that the more I pay attention to scientific discovery, the more I'm open to the idea that God is three in one, not less. I know sometimes people think the more and more you get interested in science, the more and more you pay attention to scientific discovery, the less and less room you'll have for things like God or mystery. But for me, it's the opposite. For me, the more and more I read and learn about what scientists are discovering about the nature of the universe, the more I see this is a very mysterious and surprising and complex place, and that things in the universe that we experience all the time have multiple ways of existing. Let me offer an example. So all of us, all the time, live our lives by the presence of and because of light, right? The light that comes out from the sun, the light that comes out of light bulbs, we're used to sources of light all the time. We're convinced it's real. Scientists, though, tell us that sometimes light acts like a particle, little tiny things they call photons, and sometimes light acts like a wave, like radiation, like radio waves or ultraviolet rays. And the question is no longer, is it one or is it the other, but how do we understand that it can be both at the same time, a particle and a wave? If you are a physicist, somebody who studies things like quantum mechanics, these are the questions. They don't even say, is it a particle or is it a wave anymore? They go, somehow it's both. And at some points, the right way to talk about it, the right way to observe it is to see it acts like a particle, and other moments it acts like a wave. And meanwhile, another discovery of science in the recent centuries is that light is just the visible frequencies that our eyes can recognize, but of the same stuff that radio waves and ultraviolet rays and gamma rays and X-rays, all the same thing, just at different frequencies. In other words, all the time, the universe carries a lot of mystery with it that my eyes can't perceive or that my senses can't wrap themselves around, and yet are true at the same time. The light that is so ordinary, that comes up over the horizon every day, that is so obvious, turns out to be a lot more complicated, a substance, a reality than we realize. It's particle and wave at the same time. Well, once I'm willing to acknowledge that even just the physical world I live in has ways of being two things at once, all of a sudden maybe I can say, I can admit that a God who reigns over the universe, who created everything, is going to be more mystery then I can wrap my brain around. Maybe it's possible to say God is three and one at the same time. And that mystery, that idea that God lives in relationship with God's own self, which is really what the Trinity is all about. That God isn't some lonely bearded fellow in the sky who makes the universe out of loneliness, but God's life is already perfectly complete in relationship between the persons of the Trinity, and yet God chooses to create anyway. That I can wrap my brain around, even if I don't quite understand how it works. So this coming Sunday, we're going to invite you to step into the mystery that is the Trinity and maybe explore why it's good news that God is three persons in one being, and why we haven't just said, oh, that's too complicated, let's chuck that idea. No, we hold on to that the same way that we find ourselves wrapped up in the mystery, that things as ordinary as sunlight can also be full of mystery, particle and wave all at the same time. Maybe every day we are opened to mystery beyond our capacity to completely understand or dissect, but simply to participate in. And maybe that's really what the idea of the Trinity in God is all about, that God, who already exists in relationship, opens up that relationship to invite human beings to participate in that love that is God as well. I might not understand any more than that, but that's enough to spend a lifetime on. So join us this coming Sunday for that conversation as we explore what it means to be loved by and to worship the Holy Trinity. See you Sunday.